welcome to Brain Chat. I'm Dr. Mitzi Joy Williams, your board-certified neurologist and MS specialist, and my mission is to engage, educate, and empower those affected by MS to become an active part of their healthcare team. Here on Brain Chat, we'll be discussing all things MS, health and wellness, advocacy, and we'll even throw a little bit of music and music therapy in there as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for the next episode. Well, hello. Happy Monday and welcome to Brain Chat. I'm Dr. Williams, the nerdy neurologist, and I am so excited to be here with you guys again to talk about an important topic that affects not just people living with multiple sclerosis, but all neurologic conditions and really everybody, period. And that is brain health. And I've got two amazing experts with me today to discuss this really important topic. But before we get into that, if you've ever logged on Brain Chat, please log into the chat. Let us know where you are viewing us from. I bid you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia, where it is nice and warm and sunny. And I hope that everyone is having a wonderful start to their week. We also like to thank the National MS Society for sponsoring Brain Chat. And let's go ahead and get our guests up to the stage. So first, we have Dr. Augusto Miravalle. He is the chief of the MS division at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, Illinois, where I was born, Chi-Town. And then we also have Dr. Susan Peyrovi, who is a clinical assistant professor of integrative medicine at Stanford. Welcome to Brain Chat, my friends.
Thank you, Mitzi. It's an honor being here.
Awesome. Or let me say welcome back, because both of you have been on Brain Chat before. All right. Very, very cool. So I'm really excited to talk about brain health because this is a really hot topic. Unlike some of our other areas of the body, the brain is still one of those organ systems that we got a whole lot to learn. Let's just put it like that. And so there's really been a lot of emphasis, I think, over the past couple of years in focusing on brain health. Like I get lots of folks asking me to write articles about it. What does it mean? You see it in all the health magazines. So I'm ready to get into some of the nitty gritty, not too gritty, but just a little bit about brain health. But before we do that, first, tell us a little bit about yourselves, each of you, and kind of how you got interested in your field of study. We'll start with you, Dr. Miravalle.
All right. So yeah, I'm a neurologist and a specialist in multiple sclerosis. And similarly to what you just described, the field of brain health has been evolving in the last decade, I would say. And mostly my patients made me interested in brain health when they start asking for more than just a medication to help with multiple sclerosis. And they start asking, well, what can I do from a nutritional standpoint, from an exercise, from a lifestyle intervention? So I will say that I got interested in brain health mostly from requests from my patients.
I love it. What about you, Dr. Peyrovi?
Yeah, I was an anesthesiologist, had a child, had some symptoms, which eventually got diagnosed as MS. And I had to do a big pivot. I couldn't use my left arm very well to do some of the really important procedures. So I'm trying to figure out how to improve my own health. I went kind of on a journey of going to conferences and learning about other tools beyond pharmaceuticals. I wanted to have all the tools in place because brain health was actually really important to me. I was a new mom. I was young, and I just wanted to make sure that I could keep this thing under control as much as possible. So I ended up actually preaching to patients what I learned to, use to take care of myself. So now I practice integrative medicine and functional medicine, and I love it.
Awesome. And so what I heard from both of you is that you saw a need, whether it was in yourself or in your patients, and then you began to study. Because the truth of the matter is, we don't get a lot of education about these things in our medical school or residency training. I keep saying every time I took nutrition was like 2 weeks. When I had it, and I don't remember any of it. We might have talked about phytonutrients or something. Nothing very specific for our patients. So, very much like both of you, when my patients would come and ask me, I'm like, eat right and exercise. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have any specific recommendations. But if we wanted specific recommendations, we kind of have to look them up and find the information ourselves. And so, I think, that's really important, for our patients to understand that we are also learning. We just had a big meeting, the Academy of Neurology meeting earlier this year, and there was a talk about brain health with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and I found it very interesting. And he was talking about, how with cardiovascular health, there are things that we know you're supposed to do and we can kind of predict. We're not quite there with brain health, but hopefully at some point we'll be able to have those predictors that really tell us about brain health. But before we do go into any further detail, like about what helps brain health, let's just talk about what is brain health. What does that mean to each of you?
Yeah. So, and I will say that American Academy of Neurology has been very helpful in truly helping us and assisting us, and even the definition of brain health. Uh,
Mhm.
and I like it a lot because it truly gives us this sense of a continuing state. So, based on the AAM definition, brain health is a state of continuing, attaining, and maintaining the optimal health of the brain to support one's physical, emotional, and social well being throughout every stage of life. And if
Mhm.
you kind of dissect a little bit that definition, there are a few elements that I will say are critical. One is this concept of a continuing state, meaning that it's not that you ever graduate from becoming, healthy or brain healthy, right? So it's something that is constantly happening, and that's something that no matter where you are in your life, there is always something you can do to improve that overall health. And the other aspect that I love in the definition is that it includes every aspect of life, anything from our physical health to our mental and cognitive health, but also something that we never talk about school, social life, and the importance of socialization as a critical aspect to keep our brain healthy. So I think that this definition perhaps is one of the most comprehensive ones.
Absolutely. So a comprehensive definition that not just includes, how we think or how fast our reaction time, but things like socialization. There are many, many different aspects. I love that. What about you, Dr. Payrobi? What are your thoughts about what brain health means?
That was a great comprehensive definition from a neurologist. I love that because it was really just encompassing all that the brain controls. And maybe I'll just kind of take it to an experiential level. What does it mean to have good brain health? We're all going to age. Things will change, especially as hormones shift and, we put more birthdays under our belt. It's about really maintaining function and being able to engage in the things that are important to us, to have meaningful interactions with our friends and families, to do work that is gratifying, to have mood that allows us to get through our day without too much anxiety, and being able to engage with our life on a day-to-day basis. And yes, absolutely, things will shift even in a perfectly healthy person as that person
Mhm.
ages. But for those of us that live with MS, perhaps there could be more problems along the line, and that process may be accelerated. So there are many things we can do to maintain function and quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about kind of brain health, 50,000 foot view, how does that play into the worsening or progression, or how does that affect multiple sclerosis? I'll start with you, Dr. Mirabala.
Yeah, so and most recently we started to have evidence that supports that. Let's just pick one area of brain health, which has to do with exercise. And now we are starting to see that exercise not only helps things like improving strength or improving dexterity of function, with perhaps the more obvious consequences. If you exercise more, your endurance is going to increase. If you exercise more, your balance may increase or improve. So those are kind of like the obvious outcomes. But most recently, we started also learning that if you have regular routines of exercise, things like memory may get better and cognitive
Mhm.
function, particularly processing speed, may improve. And even some MRI studies have shown that people who were enrolled in a routine of exercise for 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, for 3 months. So it's not a long time if you start thinking about it. When you look at, for example, structural MRIs and functional MRIs,
Mhm.
individuals with MS have higher density of the hippocampus, which is that part of the brain that stores memory, and also from a functional MRI standpoint, has more active, a higher resting state MRI in hippocampus. What that tells us is that it's actually benefiting things like the structure, the volume, the amount of neurons in the brain, in critical areas of the brain that are, for example, related to memory. So we are now starting to see that exercise, which is one of the main pillars of brain health, goes beyond just the obvious improved motor
Mm.
function to now translate into other functions of the brain that perhaps we never thought before.
Yeah, and I think that this is really important because, as you alluded to earlier, Dr. Perovi, you wanted to treat your MS holistically, right? We know that the therapies that we have to treat MS have progressed and have improved significantly over time. And we certainly want to use those in helping to slow disease. But many times people are asking, what can I do for myself? What can I do to help myself? What other things can I do? And I always look at it not as and right, not as a either or, but a and right. So they're like, I want to be natural. I'm like, well, let's be natural and take medicine. Okay, let's do both of these things, right? Because we get the optimal response when we treat everything holistically. For instance, using disease modifying therapies if those are appropriate after discussion with their physician, to slow inflammation and give the body time to heal, but also these other activities, behaviors are equally as important and not only are good for your overall health, but actually affect your brain, right? The size of your brain, the function of your brain. Tell me some thoughts about that, Dr. Pirovi.
I mean, there's MS is a serious disease, right? And as a person who's been on the receiving end of the diagnosis, like it was a turning point for me where it was like, what am I going to do at this juncture in my life? Am I going to continue doing what I'm doing? And I was working and staying up all night and high stress and eating hospital food, doing nothing really that was really supporting my health. Or am I going to turn things around and really just focus on my value of just improving my health? And once I kind of developed this belief that perhaps I can influence the future course of MS by using all my tools. It's not about the lifestyle strategies competing with pharmaceuticals. As someone living with MS, like I want all the tools because I want to do the very best in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I have to change the way I did things. And, going back to what Dr. Miravalli said, exercise is magic. I mean, it is probably the most potent anti-inflammatory tool that we have. It is the most fast-acting antidepressant, anti-anxiety tool that we have. Exercise can actually stress your mitochondria, the parts of the cell that produce energy for us. And it's a short-term stress. And in that period of stressing your mitochondria, you're actually making them work better, more efficiently. And then you stop exercising and the stress goes away. But you've now just recalibrated your mitochondria. So you're putting energy out better. And when you fuel your body better, because you did some exercising, your mitochondria work better. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yes, I just heard that, but now when you're speaking, I don't hear it.
Okay, got it. Okay, let's see. What should I go back to? Maybe I'll just start with the mitochondria.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you exercise, you're applying a short-term stress to your mitochondria, and that makes them sort of rise to the occasion and work better. So they may increase in numbers, they may improve the way they're functioning, and so energy output improves. That makes your immune system work better. That improves mood. That improves your gut microbiome. Hormones are improved. So there's this broad effect of exercise on all of your physiology. And of course, the brain is being supported by that, right? Brain-derived neurotrophic factor levels go up after exercise. Like when I'm on my treadmill running, I kind of imagine this like halo of BDNF around my head, where I'm like, I'm going to just visualize this happening in my brain as I'm doing this. And it's just one of those tools that you can't do without if you want better brain health. In fact, I'd say if there was one tool, it would be exercise for me.
Yeah. So I need to go put my running shoes on. That's what it sounds like. No, but seriously. So we've talked about exercise, which is a very extremely important pillar of brain health. What are some of the other pillars of brain health?
So certainly nutrition, right, goes hand by hand with exercise. I think there is now an abundance of scientific evidence that supports the connection between what we eat in the gut microbiome, meaning the bacteria that we have in the gut, and the connection between that immune responses, and of course immune responses and MS. So it's fascinating, and actually it doesn't take that long from dietary changes to truly improve or worsen that microbiome in the gut, right? So it takes a few weeks to truly make a difference. So I think understanding what are the elements in our diet that either help or hurt our inflammation is important. Perhaps the most we studied are the trans fats. So those fats that are solid at room temperature, those are pro-inflammatory. And the big one in our culture is cheese. I don't know why, but there is this overemphasis in cheese in our diets, and that's full of trans fats, and we don't need to add that to our diet. The other big one is salt, and we know that salt is also neurotoxic. So less than 2 grams per day of sodium, which once you count that is a third of a teaspoon. So it's that you get there very quickly. So if you can make your meals and try to prevent these processed meals and trans fats and salts, well, that's already something good that you're doing to yourself. Smoking is terrible, right? So we know that there are some components that are relatively simple to eliminate.
Absolutely. So let's dig a little bit deeper into diet. As I alluded to my 2 weeks of nutrition, so I'm a nutrition expert, apparently. But Dr. Perovi, you and I had a conversation in our last brain chat where we talked about integrative medicine, and we spent a little bit of time talking about diet. This is one that I think our patients are very concerned about. A lot of times people ask me first visit, what should I be eating? What things are pro-inflammatory? What things are anti-inflammatory? What kind of diet should I eat? My friend is doing this one, and someone else is doing this one. Kind of where do I start? So where do you tell people to start when they're thinking about adjusting their diet or changing their lifestyle after a chronic diagnosis like MS?
This is probably the number one question I get. What is the best diet for MS? And I think people get too hung up on wanting to pick the best diet. There
Mm.
isn't a best diet, but I talk to people about general nutritional principles. So a whole foods plant-based diet. So whole foods means eating real food, like the thing that actually grew in nature that you bought maybe from the farmer's market and brought to your house and prepared it. No one gets down to 0% processed foods, but let's be choosy about what we bring into our kitchens, right? So eating as much real food as possible and then eating mostly plants. I didn't say you had to be vegetarian or vegan, but instead of eating a big old piece of chicken or steak with a piece of asparagus next to it, like let's flip that ratio where at least maybe 80% of what's on your plate, on the surface area of that plate, at least 80% can be plants. That's not just vegetables and fruits, but it's herbs and spices, beans, legumes, whole grains, all. And the other thing I always kind of put in there is color. Color is where all the healing molecules are, the phytonutrients, right? And they have anti-inflammatory effects. They are antioxidants, and antioxidants actually protect our cells, proteins, and DNA. So you want to have lots and lots of antioxidants in your body. Best way to get that is through plant-based foods. So if you could eat mostly real food and mostly plants, you'll get there. Then you can, if you want, to start kind of dialing it down and choose one of the MS diets or not an MS diet. Like that's up to you. But we all have different cultural influences. We have different access to different foods. Our budgets are different. Our tastes are different. Like there's no way you could put all MS patients on the same diet and say this is the best one. So I think there has to be a lot of sort of give and take, and people need to experiment and personalize it for themselves. I think, and I, as a functional medicine doctor, integrative medicine doctor, people are always asking me to personalize that for them. I actually think people are very capable of personalizing things for themselves when you kind of give them the big overarching principles, right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, we talk about eating mostly organic and non-GMO when it's possible. And then here's one I also always put in there: prebiotics and probiotics
Mm.
help build up that gut microbiome and help it flourish. So probiotics are your fermented foods, and your prebiotics are foods just that contain the right kind of fiber that will feed your gut microbiome. This could be like bananas, kiwi, chicory root, Jerusalem artichokes, green leafy vegetables, garlic, onion. So getting these foods in our diets will actually go a long way. And as Dr. Mirabal explained, it doesn't take that long. In fact, there are studies that show if you take someone from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet, and if you're checking their microbiome every day, at about a day and a half, you start seeing a shift. That's not very long, right? So that should make us feel like we can do this. Like we can change our gut microbiome if we intend to by putting in the right foods.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, the key when we're thinking about this is oftentimes when we think about things like diet and exercise, we think about heart health, we think about losing weight and looking a certain way, but again, these sometimes small changes can make large changes in our brain health, even if we don't necessarily see a scale moving drastically or, we don't get skinny automatically, etc. And I think that that's really important. So we talked about diet, we talked about exercise. Let's talk about sleep. So at our academy meeting, there was a very interesting talk that I attended, and we talked about something called the glymphatic system. Now, this is not something that I learned about a whole lot in medical school, but apparently, in different parts of our body, we think about our lymphatic system, which often takes, I usually think about the lymphatic system when I have people who have swelling, right? Because the lymphatic system is primarily the way fluid is absorbed so that we don't have huge arms and legs, because that fluid, is absorbed when we're moving around and doing things. So there's different processes through our body where different types of debris, chemicals build up, all of those things are removed from our body. That often happens through our kidneys, our liver, etc. But there's no system like that in the brain. So actually, one of the researchers who had done like a lot of the groundbreaking research to understand how does basically all the junk that accumulates in our brains get transported out of the brain into other parts of the body and disposed of. And that's through a system called the glymphatic system. And so essentially, this system removes different debris from our brains, and it primarily works when we are sleeping, because when we're awake, we're doing things like talking on brain chat, hanging out with our family, working, all the things. And so, the brain can't do this complex function while we're up and around and doing other stuff. And so it really was underscoring the importance of getting adequate restful sleep. They recommended more than 6 hours of sleep. And if we're not getting adequate sleep, it can lead eventually to things like dementia, because some of those compounds that accumulate in the brain can cause dementia later in life if they're not cleared properly. So let's talk about the importance of sleep in brain health. I'll go to you first, Dr. Pirovi, and then I'll go to you, Dr. Mirabali.
Sure. So if I had to pick my second tool for brain health after exercise, it would be sleep. Because when toxic things get into the brain, whether it's like ordinary toxins or byproducts of just our metabolism, they can actually cause inflammation in the brain, and that can over time accelerate brain loss of neurons and lead you to a dementia-like state. So we want to be able to clean up the brain. And what's really cool is like our daytime physiology is sort of different than our nighttime physiology when we're sleeping. Sleeping is when that rest and repair and regeneration and restoration happens. We clean things up, and much of that cleaning up is accelerated at nighttime when we sleep. But we just have to be down long enough to be able to clear things up. So patients that have a family history of dementia always come to me and say, hey, I'm really concerned about my brain health. What supplements can I take? Are there any medications? I wish I had an answer, like a pill I could give them and say, this is your dementia prevention pill. But it doesn't exist. One of the best things you could do is to just sleep and let your body do what it was designed to do.
Yeah, I used to say during residency, sleep is for suckers. And that is not true. Like I need sleep. And if you think about it just in a just logical sense, right? Even when we think about the symptoms of MS, things like cognitive problems, fatigue. I have lots of people that come in and say, "Hey, Dr. Mitzi, I'm really having bad fatigue. It's so, I can't function." I was like, "How many hours do you sleep in a night?" Like 3. I'm like, "Well, honey, you're gonna be tired if you sleep in 3 hours a night, right? Or if you're on average sleeping 4 hours a night, and then one night you get 12, and then the other 6 nights of the week you get 5. And so, these things are connected with our just regular functioning, but really, it really makes a difference for our overall brain health. What were you gonna say, Dr. Mirabale?
No, I absolutely agree, and I will say that particularly in multiple sclerosis,
Mhm.
sleep disorders are primarily secondary to other circumstances. For example, the big one is the bladder, right? So if patients have to wake up in the middle of the night 2, 3 times to empty the bladder, that's going to interrupt the sleep. And as Dr. Robbie mentioned, not only the total hours of sleep matters, but also the continuous hours. So you have to get to that REM sleep in order to actually get those microglial cells, right, the janitors of the brain, to clean up that amyloid, all the junk that accumulates in the brain. And I always explain to patients that the cleaning crew in buildings, they usually work at night when everyone leaves, right? Well, the
Mhm.
microglial cells in the brain also work at night while we sleep. But you have to get to that deep sleep. And in order to do that, you have to avoid interruptions. So the big one is bladder. Second one is spasticity. So if you have
Mhm.
muscle cramp or you occur at night, that's going to interrupt the sleep. So of course, the next day you're going to be tired. So the worst thing we can do when someone comes to us and say, my fatigue is worse, is prescribe a pill to wake them up. Because what we can do then is almost create the opposite effect. They don't sleep well because they are
Mhm.
anxious and they have more irritability, right? So you create more of an issue. So the proper management of fatigue is take good history, do a good physical exam, and assess all the possible factors that first could potentially interrupt sleep. And then once we eliminated those, once we address all those factors, then we are certain that this is perhaps primary fatigue, and that's when perhaps the psychostimulants may help.
Absolutely. So I usually describe it like, let's say we have this much of a problem from the MS. And for those that are listening, I'm using my fingers. We have this much of a problem from MS. And then on top of that, so let's say we have this much fatigue from the MS. On top of that, you add, let's say, depression, which can also cause fatigue, which makes it a bigger problem. And then on top of that, you add sleep deprivation, which could be related to the depression, et cetera. It becomes this big of a problem when maybe this much is from the MS, but we have to try to sort out these other factors and make sure that we're addressing those. So, number one, we can really get an idea of what a baseline is that's related to the MS, and that will help us to best figure out how to manage that or how to treat that. Other things that are very common is sleep apnea. So I got a lot of snorers who have sleep apnea that is not diagnosed or who are not wearing their CPAPs. And that also is affecting sleep and causing sleepiness during the day. So, many times with MS, there are multiple issues that may be kind of compounding on each other to affect one symptom. And all of it may not be the MS, it may be other things that we need to address and lifestyle modification to try to work on it. What about sleep routine? So, this was a big one because a lot of times when people come in and they can't sleep, they want a medication to help them sleep. But oftentimes they may not have a good sleep routine. So I do a lot of education about sleep hygiene. Just like you wake up in the morning, brush your teeth, wash your face. That's what I tell my kids to do. Sometimes they don't do it in the right order, but um, you should have a sleep routine, right? Turn that phone off. Stop looking and scrolling on social media, which is activating your brain. Don't necessarily bring your laptop and do work if you're having trouble sleeping. Maybe listen to some meditation music, do a little stretching, do a little yoga routine. What are some tips that people can use to kind of help them to develop a sleep routine? I'll start with you, Dr. Perovi.
Yeah, this is sort of like my bread and butter because it's so common, not just among people with MS, but just people in general. There's way too much competing for our attention. And people want to just like relax, right, with Instagram and just keep scrolling. And so if you're really truly serious about improving your brain health, like it's really important to actually commit to doing some of these things because they do work. Behaviors are probably the most powerful tools in improving sleep. So I loved your idea about the bedtime routine. And I tell people to start that 30 minutes to 2 hours before their time that they want to be asleep. And it could be so many things, right? Like do something relaxing, dim the lights, quiet the house, go look at the starry sky, take a warm bath, whatever works, right? But there's also two things that I also talk to patients about that'll set them up for success. One is daily exercise. Now you don't have to exercise hard every day. Maybe you exercise like those 30 minutes, like Dr. Miravalle mentioned, 30 minutes, 3 times a week. And then in between you do something more restorative, yoga, an easy walk, or whatever it is, right? But moving our bodies regularly, because that's probably one of the best regulators of our nighttime sleep quality. And then getting early morning light. In fact, if you can get up and look at the sky when the sun is rising and you see those pink and blue hues and all those beautiful colors, like if you can get that light into your eyeballs, that'll actually help calibrate your circadian rhythms. And it'll help you be sleepier earlier in the night, and you'll struggle less. I think too often we as doctors might prescribe sleep medications or patients ask for them, but they're just dangerous. There's a lot of data that overuse of these medications increases all-cause mortality. So, yes, it's okay to use these drugs short term. Like everybody has hard days, people go through rough times, and you just need a little relief. But the foundation of it is really just behaviors.
What do you think, Dr. Miravalle?
Yeah, no, those are excellent tips, and I will just simply add our brain, and I would say our body in general loves routines, right? So it's if you get into a routine of things, you go to bed at roughly the same time every day, and try to eat usually at the same time, and allow a couple of hours between your last meal and the time you go to bed. Don't read in bed. Don't train your brain to be awake in bed, right? So don't do
That's right.
anything that will force some sort of cognitive activity while in bed. Those are wonderful things, and I always remind patients you can control your brain. So somehow we feel that the brain is this organ that controls everything we do. No, we can control the brain. So we can train the brain to do what we want. And sleep is one of those things that if you train your routine, whatever formula works for you, and then keep doing that, and that you're going to see the benefits.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be boring. It can be fun. So I listen to sleep stories, some of which are entertaining when I can make it through the whole thing. Usually I can't make it past the first, 10 minutes or so, but I listen to sleep stories. Sometimes my kids put on sleep stories and I listen to their stories, which are really hilarious. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes I'll have like essential oils in the background, when I'm trying to calm down and get everybody ready for bed, those types of things. So, you can have fun with it. It can be something that is unique to you, whether it's some type of music you like to listen to, or, some type of story, or I listen to binaural beats sometimes, or sometimes a meditation, before I go to bed, so they're all different types of things that you can do to kind of facilitate that. You were going to say something, Dr. P. Roby.
Well, actually, what Dr. Miravalle said reminded me of something. Like I love this idea of routines and
Mhm.
especially people who resist routines, um, actually need routines the most because you're like a person that hates structure, but if you have some structure, you'll actually do better. You said something about eating early, and I think if you can eat 3 hours before the time you want to be asleep, your upper GI tract is empty. And now, when you sleep, rather than your GI tract going, oh no, now there's a piece of chocolate cake that just came down the tube that I got to deal with, your GI tract can actually come up into repair mode, right? And we talk a lot in functional medicine and integrative medicine about gut health. If we can get the gut to be healthier, like that lining of the GI tract to be a nice tissue that can regulate what goes in and out, we can actually improve how the immune system works. So eating early is just one of the best things that you can do. And also it helps improve brain function as well. So no solids after 3 hours before bed. It's something you can work up towards over time. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I love that comment. And just to add a little bit more to that,
Yeah, go to it.
the other typical one is alcohol at night. And even though
Mm.
you may think that alcohol may help you sleep, it's actually not good for restorative sleep. So if you find yourself waking up at 3 a.m. every night, you might want to look at what you eat and how late you eat. And certainly, if you like a glass of wine before going to bed, maybe just eliminate that for a couple of weeks and see what happens. Alcohol before going to bed may not be the right idea.
Yeah, I love those tips. And again, I think, it's about, finding that best routine for you and being able to examine and eliminate certain things to see how they affect, each individual. So when we think about maintaining brain health, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about diet, we've talked about exercise, we've talked about sleep. Are there any other pillars or things that people can do to maintain their brain health?
Big one is social life. And
Mm,
so whether you look at
talk about that.
Alzheimer's studies, and now we have the 14 risk factors for dementia were published in the Lancet in 2022, and they emphasize social life. They also emphasize air pollution, which was a new one. But when you look at the effects of being lonely and feeling alone, which are two different things, but when you combine the two, that is actually equivalent to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day for a year to the brain health. So
Wow. Say
you
that
can,
one more time. Say that
yeah,
one more time for the
being
people in the
lonely,
back.
and feeling alone, right? So the two, right? So if you live by yourself, that's fine. But if you feel lonely, if you feel that you don't have social connection in your life, that could have a harmful effect to the brain that is equivalent to smoking half a pack of cigarettes per day for a year.
Mm,
So it's okay to live alone if those are your circumstances, but try to make an effort to socialize, to get out of the house, to talk to neighbors. And not only that superficial socialization, but actually when you can get into those deep connections in someone in your life that truly knows you, you know that person. And even though there is no evidence behind what I'm gonna say now, everything up until now there is evidence, but this is my opinion. I believe that animals play a role there too. So it doesn't have to be a human. Sometimes you build those deep connections with a pet. But
mhm.
the importance of social life, whether it's through church, through hobbies, activities you can do, that has a profound effect on your brain health.
I love it. And what about the role of doing lots of people ask me about different exercises. Should I be doing Sudoku? Should I be doing crossword puzzles, word searches? What about activities that keep your brain active like reading? What role do those play in brain health?
I think what I'll say is, when I talk to my patients about brain health, so I'll ask them like, "What do you do?" And they'll say like, "I do puzzles or I do Sudoku." Great, now go do something different. Because I want you to challenge your brain in a different way. Like take a
Mm,
class, learn how to dance, learn a new language. Like it's never too late. It's really about challenging your brain in different ways so you can make more neural connections because the brain is always changing, even into our 80s, 90s, and beyond, right? And
mhm.
so while those tools are actually really helpful, doing brain games, I just say don't just do the same thing every day. Mix it up.
I love that.
Completely,
I love it.
completely agree. And I always tell the story of a patient with mild cognitive impairment that was just in his room doing Sudoku and missing the chance to be with his family during lunch, right? So if those exercises will isolate you because you're on the computer all day, then you're not getting the benefit, right? Sometimes going for a walk with your loved one, with your neighbor, that actually brings so much more cognitive stimulation, having a good conversation with someone, than actually being inside a room playing some video game.
I love it. I love it. I'm over here taking notes like, okay, I need to go take a walk. I need to talk this. Okay. No, but seriously, I think these things are extremely important. And it's important to know that it's never too early to start. right? When we think about brain health, we often think about, oh, well, when I get in my 60s, how do I avoid dementia and things like that? But, building these habits earlier in life, will help sustain you and help maintain your brain health over time. So it's never too early to start taking care of your brain, particularly if you're dealing with a chronic condition like multiple sclerosis. So we are coming up on the end of our time. So a couple of questions I love to ask. What type of research or what new research are you aware of in the field of brain health? What are you involved in? What types of projects where brain health is concerned? I'll start with you, Dr. Pirovi, and go to you, Dr. Miravalle.
Ooh, what kind of research on brain health? Okay, so my clinic's actually under the Department of Psychiatry, so I work a lot with patients with mood disorders. And some of the new research, it's actually not new research, is that, we're always finding new things that are like just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning a lot about the role of muscle in brain health. Muscles are not just there to propel your body forward, right, and to move you. It's also, muscle is actually an endocrine organ that secretes hormone-like substances. And when you contract muscles, you release molecules that are called myokines. And these proteins can get into the brain and actually have an antidepressant effect. I just find that fascinating. And all you got to do is move your muscles. And for
Wow.
those people that have physical limitations, you can even have somebody help you move your muscles passively. Like the muscle just needs to contract, right? And so this is why it's so important to do resistance training to help build the biggest reserve of muscle you can achieve, because as we age, we lose muscle over time. You can slow that down. So again, exercise, movement as medicines for brain health and mood.
I love it. What about you? Any interesting research or innovations that you've heard about in this field?
Yeah, no, actually, we are fortunate at Rush that it's the place where the mind diet was developed. So we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise at Rush to help us incorporate the mind diet with our patients. And the mind diet is the Mediterranean plus the DASH diet. So the Mediterranean diet plus the low sodium diet for cardiovascular health. And so we are working on a brain health program here for our MS patients,
Mm,
incorporate exercise, but prescribing exercise to the patient's needs, as well as nutritional interventions to improve brain health. But I would like to add to Dr. Peyrovi's comment. There was a recent article that I still think about it because it's so mind blowing. They looked at a functional MRI, which measures the activity of the brain, and they looked at that in two cohorts of patients, one control and one with bilateral leg amputee, so individuals that have no legs. And they asked them to imagine movement, and both groups have equivalent amount of cortical activation. So what that study showed us is you don't need to have the legs. If you are thinking about movement, the brain
mm,
responds in a very similar way to the actual act of moving. So I will be very interested to see how this field of imagining movement will evolve, particularly for patients that have limited physical abilities due to
yeah.
disability, being able to still get benefit, the cortical
Mm.
activation you get with movement by just simply thinking about movement.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, well, I became a neurologist because I think the brain is amazing. But yeah, that is so amazing. Yeah, yeah, I don't know what else to say besides that's amazing. Okay, so tell us where to find you. Tell us where to find the True Medicine, Dr. Peyrovi. Tell us where to find the Colorado Brain Health Institute, and tell us a little bit about some of the work that you guys do in those specific entities.
Sure. So my clinical practice is at Stanford, and I see all kinds of patients, but only people in California. And I wanted to reach more people. I just feel that it's so important to get this information out there, because lifestyle therapies are as important as your pharmaceuticals, as your DMTs.
Right.
They're used together. You're going to have the best outcome. It's the best way to treat MS. So I created True Medicine, which is an online wellness program for people with multiple sclerosis as well as other autoimmune conditions. But of course, I'm biased. I like the MS topic the most because it's the one that I can say I know what that feels like. And it's online. We have a community of people that are very growth mindset, um, motivated, wanting to improve their health, and I pepper in all of these principles from functional medicine to make it affordable and accessible. And I help people with implementation. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And that's True Medicine MS.
.com.
Okay, perfect. Tell us about the Brain Health Institute,
Yeah,
Dr.
so
Mirabali.
my wife and I, we founded a nonprofit back in 2018 called Brain Health Center of the Rockies. And so you can find us at a brainhealthcr.org. So that's Brain Center of the Rockies.org. And through that nonprofit, we provide education on brain health, mostly to multiple sclerosis patients, but we are starting also a neuromyelitis optica and MOGA program.
Mm-hmm.
And we also run brain health fairs, so all sort of fun activities. And then clinically, I see patients at Rush in Chicago.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you all for the amazing work that you're doing to help the rest of us learn. Listen, I learned a lot. I've got like a whole page of notes over here just from talking to you guys. And so I really appreciate the amazing work that you're doing and what you're doing to help advance brain health for people living with multiple sclerosis. Thank you so much for spending time with me on Brain Chat. Thank you to all of our viewers on Brain Chat. Please subscribe on YouTube. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, all podcast platforms to Brain Chat with the Nerdy Neurologist. And thank you to our sponsor, National MS Society, and to all of our viewers out there. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.